Welcome back to Gigi Says What Now? We are doing another deep dive into the Epstein files. And as with my previous videos on this subject, we are continuing to try and follow the money and also kind of understand the world in which these predatory elite operate. There are several people whose names regularly come up. There's Leon Black, there's Les Wexner, there's the Kushner family. All of these people deserve their own deep dives, and a lot of really amazing people on the internet have done a lot of those deep dives. One would be Becca Day. I highly suggest you check her out over on the Clock app. But for today, we are going to be going over file number EFTA 012499207. One more important note to remember is that anybody and any names, any addresses, anything redacted from the files under law has to be redacted only for national security measures to protect the names, identities, and contact information of the victims or anything that's an ongoing investigation. And as you'll see in this file, as well as most of the files, there are a ton of redactions. And whether this is a national security issue or if it's part of an ongoing investigation, I can't tell you. We can hope it's part of an ongoing investigation, right? They can claim it is, right? But proof of an ongoing investigation, well, that just doesn't exist. So let's get started. This is in Federal Bureau of Investigation intake form dated 4/5/2021. It says redacted, date of birth redacted, home telephone redacted, was interviewed by telephone by FBI special agents, redacted, after being advised of identities of the interviewing agent and the nature of the interview, redacted following the following information. Redacted had been in the securities business for 32 years. He was at Redacted from 2012 to 2017. From 2012 to 2015, he was based Redacted. In 2015, he transferred to Redacted New York location at Redacted. Redacted was running the Redacted branches of his unit out of his location in the New York office. He held a Securities 30 license, which meant he supervised regulatory reporting and held the most senior position at his unit. He managed 50 people. He was in New York until March of Redacted when he left Redacted. So they're interviewing a guy who knows some shit. Okay, so this is related to fraud allegations. In his initial complaint to the FBI, Redacted highlighted rope traders were gaining access to the electronic trading platform at Redacted from their homes. A rope trader is exactly what it sounds like. Redacted, the co-head of brokerage, was able to override controls that were in place. To cover losses at Redacted, people within the company tried to rob Blank Pool of trading funds. The people trying to cover their losses would come to Redacted because he had a Series 30 license. By robbing the various trading pools to cover losses, Redacted advised it was materialized to the losses and the brokers were being robbed of revenue. Redacted was involved in a global Ponzi scheme. So Redacted was involved in a global Ponzi scheme because they forced their employees to pay 10% of the salary bonus into a share scheme that they never became invested in. Employees were told that they could sell the shares if they signed on to work at Redacted for 4 more years. And employees were never given vesting rights or voting rights for this scheme, and the share prices were dropping. So on page 2, it goes on. Now, page 2 is dated 2/16/2021, page 2 of 3. Redacted advised Redacted and Cantor Fitzgerald were all known for money laundering. So Cantor Fitzgerald is a financial services firm that was formed in 1945. They specialize in tech, trading, AI, crypto, all the money stuff. Now, they lost about 68% of their staff in the attacks on the World Trade Center on 9/11. Howard Lutnick, the head honcho back then, however, was not there that day because he was dropping off his baby child to kindergarten. Brandon Lutnick is the chairman and member of the board for BGC. He's a Stanford grad, and as of February 2025, he took over for his dad when Howard left to become Donald Trump's Secretary of Commerce. Howard Lutnick is notable for quite a few things, including possibly lying to Congress about his ties with Jeffrey Epstein. In 2025, Howard Lutnick also sued Harvard as a push by the administration to force universities to share patent revenue with the government. So within their interconnected leadership, one name pops up, and that's Stephen Merkel, who holds executive roles at both and has joint initiatives with Global Charity Day. So, Cantor Fitzgerald were known for money laundering, according to this file. Cantor Fitzgerald had a history of crime. Senior officials have spoken about the money laundering occurred. Now, Parabridge International Services was an affiliate of Redacted and Cantor Fitzgerald. Let's get into Parabridge. Oh my gosh, that would be error 404, page not found. That only mentions a couple of viral posts. Let's go. Okay. So PIS were payroll passed through in addition to the money raised on charity days. They were part of Compliance Division. Redacted thought they were illegal wire transfers involving PIS. PIS was associated with Deutsche Bank accounts in Singapore and Hong Kong. Now let's learn a little about Deutsche Bank, shall we? Deutsche Bank is heavily implicated in the 2016 Panama Papers. Now, okay, so when deep diving into these uber rich predatory class people, I mean, it's nearly impossible to avoid the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers. Both are basically leaks of shell companies that could sometimes did hide money. They laundered money and other financial crimes. Um, Sometimes they were just shell companies to hide assets or to avoid taxes. Now, it's not against the law to avoid taxes, it is against the law to evade taxes. But shell companies are commonly used in fraud and money laundering schemes, and Deutsche Bank was definitely a part of that. So Deutsche Bank, through Regula Limited, transferred approximately $350 million in unreported funds. Now, the CEO, Ashu Jain, Jain, and Jürgen Fitchen, they were the CEOs from 2012 to 2015. There's actually a little movie that was made based on the whole leak of the Panama Papers through them. But Regula Limited was an offshore entity. Anashu, Anshu, Jain, Jain. He was the president of Cantor Fitzgerald when he passed in 2022 after a 5-year battle with cancer. And he is mentioned in the files 33 times. In 2010, Jeffrey Epstein emailed Peter Mendelsohn about a meeting with him, with Anshu. I can't pronounce his name. I'm so sorry. And Martin Armstrong on Tuesday of July 22nd, 2010 at noon. And it was arranged by Anashu's assistant. That would be file number 014788894 if you wanted to look it up. Okay. Peter Mendelsohn then followed up with Jeffrey Epstein on 7/20/2010, saying the headhunter would like to see Anashu later that week, asking Jeffrey Epstein, what do you think? So since we're on the subject of Deutsche Bank and Anashu, let's talk about Southern Financials LLC for a second. So
This was through Deutsche Bank, whose co-chairman at the time was Inashu, and it was held by Jeffrey Epstein. And it held millions of dollars in assets. And this was after his 2008 sweetheart deal and conviction, where he was a convicted sex offender. It was a subsidiary of Southern Trust Company Inc., founded in 2011. And it was a conduit for payments, including transfers to foreign women. It held 16 million linked to Apollo, Leon Black's company. Of course, he keeps coming up. And it received over 200 million in revenue. And they stated that the purpose was database services with highly active accounts that didn't match their actual activities. And in a 2022 suit, the Epstein estate paid 105 million and returned 80 million in taxes due to fraud found within Southern Financial Trust, again held by Deutsche Bank, whose co-chairman was Inashu. Leon Black paid a large portion of that money, in part due to the fraudulent nature of Southern Trust. So there's that.
So this says PIS were on payroll and passed through in addition to the money raised on charity days. Um, I'll get into charity days a little bit later because it does have more to do with something else. But basically, Cantor Fitzgerald after 9/11 started doing charity days where they would take a large amount of money that they made and donate it to survivors or the families of that survived people that were lost in the 9/11 attacks. Redacted thought they were illegal wire transfers involving PIS, Parabridge International Services. PIS was associated with the Deutsche Bank accounts in Singapore and Hong Kong. Now, we already went over that. Cantor Fitzgerald was paying brokers from the foundation in other countries through PIS, and PIS had hired an exec from Deutsche Bank as the global president. Now, the Panama Papers connected Cantor Fitzgerald to the shell companies. We went over that a little bit just so you would understand what we're talking about, but this video is so all over the place, you may not understand a word I'm saying. Now we're going to go back to Howard Lutnick ran everything and he maintained a very small circle. Lutnick constructed all of the fraud being committed. He used philanthropy as a smokescreen for illegal activity. And Cantor Fitzgerald was not doing well pre 9/11. After the events of 9/11, Cantor Fitzgerald was doing well. Cantor Fitzgerald couldn't afford people's salaries and then was able to hire people and give people opportunities. Cantor Fitzgerald ran global charity days in New York and London. They invited high profile celebrities to come in and join the staff on the trading floor for the day. The charity day revenue was raised through the trades placed that day, and employees gave up their salaries for the day. And all of that money was supposed to go to the survivors of the people we lost on 9/11. And this person's claiming it didn't, that it lined Howard Lutnick's or Cantor Fitzgerald's pockets. So Cantor Fitzgerald ran a global charity day in New York and London. They invited high-profile celebrities to come and join the staff on the trading floor for the day. The charity day revenue was raised through trades placed that day, and the employees would give up their salaries for the day for the charity. Now, the brokers are paid on commission, and Redacted advised if Cantor Fitzgerald was selling the entire global revenue for the charity day, the brokers couldn't earn their commission. And even if they didn't participate in charity day, they still, their commissions, their money would go to, supposedly, they were told that the money was going to go to the survivors of the victims of 9/11. So Charity Day raised $9 to $10 million every year, and Redacted thought that it was strange that it raised nearly the same amount of money every year. And the brokers, they were not given tax relief for the loss of revenue on charity days. PIS handled all the funds raised in the United Kingdom on charity days and associated all the wire transfers. Again, this is an offshore account, possibly a shell company. So Lutnick was a neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein. in the adjoining property at 11 and 71st Street, New York, New York. Lutnick bought this property for $10 through a trust. Let's get into that. Let's get into these $10 properties, okay? What this person is referencing is in 1998, the property next to Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan estate, through the Comet Trust, transferred to Howard Lutnick for $10, a piece of property that was valued at $7.6 million, in which Lutnick took out a $4 million mortgage. Okay, so a $10 transfer is actually a phrase that's used in real estate when a property is transferred and the price isn't publicly disclosed. Now, the Comet Trust has since been dissolved. Claremont Corporate Subsidies Limited was listed as a trustee. Kyle goes on to say Les Wexner and Epstein owned the building. Lutnick bought it in a very roundabout way from Epstein. I mean, yeah. Sometimes, they may trade real estate for things other than cash. So that would be another reason why one of those kind of trusts with an undisclosed amount would be in there. It's not an actually, I'm buying this building for $10. Anyway, redacted advised there was a relationship between Liquid Funding executives and Bear Stearns. This is going to go into the Bear Stearns collapse. So let's kind of deep dive into that real quick, shall we? Jeffrey Epstein, a guy named Lipman, and another guy named Paul Novelly, Novely, who was the CEO of Apex Oil, they all sat on the board for Bear Stearns. Now, in 2008, Paul Novelly would sell the majority of his stock, of his Bear stock, to JP Morgan Chase. He was not the only one to do so. A shitload of people did so. This was a part of the 2008 financial crisis. So Bear's collapse and sale to JP Morgan Chase in March of 2008 set in motion that financial crisis. It cost Gen X our starter homes. It cost us American people, the middle class. It cost us the American dream. It was literally the century's worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And there were liquid and offshore companies that were loaded with mortgages and securities and loan operations that couldn't get paid back. And that resulted in people couldn't afford to pay their mortgages. They didn't. And homes were they were foreclosed on in mass. And it allowed for a lot of these corporations to come in and swoop up all these starter homes and all of these homes that had been foreclosed on for pennies on the dollar and jack up our rent prices and make it that much harder to buy houses. You get the point. Anyway, so Liquid Funding was owned by Bear Stearns. 40% of it was owned by Bear Stearns. And Liquid Funding ties back to a company in Delaware of a similar name and is traced back to the Paradise Papers. Remember, those are leaks. Paradise Papers and Panama Papers were leaks of suspected illegal financial wrongdoings. So back to the file. Now that we know a little bit about Bear Stearns and what they're referencing here. So Blank advised there was a relationship between Liquid Funding and executives of Bear Stearns. When Bear Stearns collapsed, the executives moved to Redacted, or they went to a Russian hedge fund. Redacted advised BGC International that it was involved in crime and money laundering. Cantor Fitzgerald is BCG's parent company. They have an interconnected leadership, and as of 2026, remains the controlling shareholder. Okay, so BCG International is a finance and tech company, originally part of Cantor Fitzgerald before becoming its own entity in 2004. And the largest shareholders were BlackRock, Vanguard, and Vanguard Group. I mean, there were others, but BlackRock and Blackwater are Leon Black companies. Just remember that. So back to the file. Redacted advised BCG International that was involved in crime and money laundering. Bear Stearns had hundreds of subsidiaries in 2018. BCG International was the parent company of many of these subsidiaries, to include JP Morgan Chase and BlackRock. So BlackRock, like I said, it's a Leon Black company. It was established in 98-99, handled private equity, 1099s, no capitals, and taxes type shit. There's high risk, long term investments without a need for liquidity or not quickly sold. High risk investments is what they handled, and taxes that go along with high risk investments. So during the 2008 crisis, BlackRock didn't suffer. It acted as a partner for the U.S. government in the Federal Reserve to manage assets from failing, and actually grew quite rapidly. Now, in 2020, the feds consulted with BlackRock, and the CEO, Laurence D. Fink, Robert S. Capituo, Kapituo, was the president, and the vice chairman was Philip Hildebrand. So on 11/2/11, Jeffrey Epstein received an email from someone stating she was going to Larry Fink's birthday party. And side note, Fink's birthday is November 12th, 1952. 52. These are old men we're talking about. Like, if we don't get justice, if we don't, if they don't face charges and go to trial and get convicted now, they're not ever going to see the inside of a jail cell. Not for the crimes against humanity, not for their financial crimes, not for anything. Fake. On 11/27/2016, this is 19 days after Donald Trump wins his first election, right? JE responds to Larry Summers, now Larry Summers, is the Harvard guy, who stepped down. And there are many, many videos, deep dive videos into Larry Summers, and I highly suggest you watch them. But anyway, he's emailing Jeffrey asking for suggestions for Treasury, for the Secretary of Treasury. And Larry says, are they open to the Dems? Amongst the short list of names, and he offered a short list of names, like they're just talking about who should be the Secretary of Treasury. Now, are they just talking about it the same way you and I would just sit around drinking coffee, talking about politics, thinking, what would you like to see? Or do they actually have influence? I don't freaking know, but they're chatting about it. And so on the short list of names that they're emailing to each other is Peter Thiel and Larry Fink. But not mentioned was Steve Mnuchin, and that was Donald Trump's first Secretary of Treasury. And also not mentioned was Scott Bessent, who's the current. BGC Partners made subsidiaries all over the world, to include Delaware, Cyprus, and Malta. BCG International used many of the same intermediaries as Interagara, which was associated with Paul Manafort. Resistance Capital was another company they were associated with. Paul Manafort, yeah. Okay, another one that deserves his own freaking deep dive. Am I right? Now, I'm sure if you're actually watching this, you're probably my age and you actually remember Manafort's name just being plastered all over the headlines. I'm just going to give you a quick little background into Paul Manafort, because I'm not going to do a deep dive into him. So he was a chairperson for Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, and is currently a consultant for crypto interests. A 2020 bipartisan committee concluded his proximity to Donald J. Trump and his ties to Russian intelligence represented a grave counterintelligence threats. In 2018, he was convicted of tax and bank fraud, and in a separate case, he pled guilty to conspiracy and witness tampering. In July 2019, he was held in Manhattan and shared a floor with Jeffrey Epstein. but he was moved before Jeffrey died. After being sentenced to 7.5 years, he was released to home confinement in May of 2020 until December 23rd, 2020, when Donald J. Trump granted him a full pardon. On November 20th, 2018, Paul Krasner emailed J.E. that a Manafort pardon would not be off the table. In 2017, Jeffrey Epstein and Thomas Jr. Landon chatted about Manafort. As a matter of fact, Jeffrey Epstein chatted about Manafort quite a bit. But then, back then, we all kind of did. Am I right? And I know we're kind of moving past Larry Summers, the Harvard guy. I just wanted to mention he was the 71st U.S. Secretary of Treasury under Clinton, and for 27 years he was the president of Harvard and an all-around POS. His wife, Liza, teaches at Harvard. Harvard is going to come up a lot as we move through these files and over the next couple of videos, just so you know. So, Interjara, which was associated with Paul Manafort, Resistance Capital was another company they were associated with. Redacted advised he thought the money being laundered through Cantor Fitzgerald and BCG International was from the Russian mafia. That was senior people in the trading market thought. That's what the senior people, that was the rumor. That was their blah blah bullshit, right? That's what they're talking about around the water cooler. They probably had some memes too. It could have also been money made by Cantor Fitzgerald through the frauds they were committing. Aubin, AUBIN Securities, was associated with banned Russian entities. Lutnick gave Sarah Ferguson offices and space above the Cantor Fitzgerald in New York for the Children in Crisis charity. Ghislaine Maxwell and Ferguson would attend the Dolce Vita parties, which raised monies for CIC and Stowe School. CIC no longer existed, but what the heck is Stowe School? Am I right? Stowe School was founded in 1923 and it costs like 30,000 euros a year to attend. A lot of people have gone there. Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin, Jack Anderson, who's the holder of the highest military order in the UK, attended. And what they focus on at Stowe School really is kind of admissions into Ivy elite colleges like Oxford or Cambridge. These people aren't like us. It's not like, me and you, we go to high school with hopes to getting into an Ivy and maybe less than 1% of us will. These people are groomed to go to these Ivy colleges. Redacted advised he never interacted with Lutnick. He had contact with Sean Lynn, the chairman of BCG Partners. Roberto Bob Velez was a whistleblower who had contact with Lutnick through the board. Velez was an American citizen. Who is Roberto Bob Velez? So Bob was a 2002 grad of Harvard, and he received the Keegan Research Award and was awarded the Art Forum Fellowship. Roberto was named for calling out Deutsche Bank regarding misconduct, specifically where philanthropy, aka charity, was used to money launder. That's Bob. Hey, Bob. Oh, and Sean Lynn, the guy we mentioned just before, Bob, he was the founding partner of BCG and became the vice chairman in October of 2020. So back to reading this file. Blank had never met Epstein or at Maxwell. Redacted thought he met Ferguson on a charity day, but he wasn't quite sure. I think you would remember meeting Sarah Ferguson. Who the fuck are you that you'd be like, I don't know, maybe. Maybe I know the Duchess of York. I don't know. So Redacted was working with the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, and was eligible for their whistleblower program. And then there's an agent note. After the conclusion of the interview, Blank contacted SA by telephone and asked if he could provide her contact information to the CFTC, and the informant, the person making this claim, provided that information. And that's it. That's the entirety of this file. I do have more files coming. I really don't like the way this video is turning out, so I think next time I'll just read the file and then tell you about who the people are in it afterwards. I hope you'll tune in. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, you're valid, you're worthy, you're loved.